Today we're looking at the balcony railings. These are images from the book. There are really two ways to go about this in terms of the design. If I were designing this for a specific client and a specific location, the first thing I'd do would be to find a local metal worker that can actually produce this kind of a balcony rail. And then I would give them some criteria and request that they provide a design. The criteria would be the building code requirements, the overall dimensions, copies of these photos that we're going to look at, and then how the balcony is going to connect to the house. They will need to know what the finished materials of the wall are and what kind of framing there's going to be for them to anchor into. With that kind of criteria, they ought to be able to produce a design using their own stock components, which would be probably the most cost-effective approach. And if everybody's happy with the final design they propose, then it goes into the construction documents and off to the building permit. Well, since this is a stock plan, essentially, I am going to need to lay out the design in more detail. And then if somebody should happen to buy these plans in the future, they are certainly free to do the process I just described. So let's take a look at the actual design. These are pages from the book. What we see here is the central bay. It has a wider railing, extends considerably beyond the edge of the window on each side. And then the windows themselves on either side have a narrower railing. In both cases, there's a central panel that approximately aligns up with the window opening. And then either side of the central panel, there's a separate feature. And in the case of the middle bay, that feature is wider. And in the case of the side bays, that feature is narrower. Let's take a look at these a little more. There's a close-up of the central bay and of the side bay. That would be the center line right there, so part of it's cut off. And there's a photograph of the actual chateau itself, and we're going to look at a close-up of this. This is one of the side bays. What I wanted to point out here, one of the things that's really important, I think, in making this design look really nice is that they've actually used two different thicknesses. They have some wider elements, and they have narrower elements. And it appears to me that these narrower elements are bars. They're rectangular sections, and the wider elements are square sections, probably on the order of 1 inch to 1 1/4 inch square. And then these bars look to be perhaps a 1/2 inch by 1 inch, 1.25 inch, same depth as the square sections, but thinner along the edge. That difference in that scaling of having two different thicknesses really helps to bring some order and structure to the overall shape, so that there's a more dominant framework that's filled in with lighter elements. I like this little bit of a Greek key kind of feature at the end of these bars. That's a nice touch. And then this piece here, this is helping to support this railing, so that if somebody's leaning on the railing, it's not going to tend to want to sag. So there are certain practical aspects to the way this is laid out that we need to keep in mind as well. We see down at the bottom center, there's a connection point to the stone windowsill below. And there's also connection points on either side. Now, that's a bit problematic if we're doing this in wood frame with a light stone exterior finish. I'm going to have to give some thought to how the connections are going to be done. I haven't yet got that worked out, but that's something I'll update you on. If we look at the top where it meets the wall, it kind of wraps around and meets the wall. There's a connection point up there. It's possible that we could eliminate these connection points at the bottom and wrap the bottom around the same way so that it's actually basically hanging off the wall. The challenge will be making it so that if there's no support in the middle, that this whole thing isn't just too flexible in the middle. Anyway, we'll be getting into all that in more detail in a future video, but for now we're just going to look at designing this railing and putting it into the Sketchup model. This is a catalog of metalwork from a company called Iron Age Metals, and they have quite a wonderful catalog. There are lots of good metalworking shops all over the country, but they don't all produce catalogs of their parts or put those catalogs online. I'm going to refer back to this catalog as I develop the design along the lines of what we saw from the photos, but it's not going to be identical. I'm going to try to work with using stock elements as much as possible so that I'm confident that the design I've produced is something that could be replicated pretty easily by most metal workers. Let's take a look, for example, at panels. This is their section on panels. They're showing elements that can be assembled in different configurations to create panels. I'll probably be working with some of those. Here's something that's got some potential. Now we're going to have to keep in mind that these elements are fixed size, and for example this panel, much as I like the look of it, is unfortunately too tall. It's 39 3/8 inches too tall. So we're going to be looking for elements that are scaled appropriately to the work we're doing. Let's see, this little figure here is 17 1/8 inch tall. That might work in. Anyway, that's the process. So making this balcony here, the things about this balcony are that it is symmetrical about the center of the window, and then it's repeated across the facade. So we're going to make it a component since it's a repeated element. And so the first step I did was I just simply made a large rectangle that pretty much encompasses the area the balcony is going to occupy. And I created that, turned that into a component, and I called it Balcony 1. And then I edited that component. Let's edit it. And inside of it, I created a second component called Balcony 1/2. And since the balcony is symmetrical about the center line, I decided that what I would do is I would model half of it. Now, let me get rid of this copy over here. And here's my Balcony 1/2. I'm going to edit that. I'm going to take this edge for the moment and move it to the center line. Okay, so this line marks the center of our balcony. Now, if I were to simply make a copy of this to get the other half of the balcony, and then I edit my component, we'll see what happens. I'll just draw some random things on it. You see, I'm not getting a mirror image here. I'm getting a translated copy. What I really need on the right side is a mirror image of this. So I'm going to make a copy. I'm going to scale that by -1 to turn it into a mirror image. And then I'm going to bring it back to the center. Now, as I develop my design for the balcony railing, the second half, the right side, will match the left. So that's the process we're going to be using to build up the design of this balcony. One or two other quick points just to make sure I've covered all the bases. Some of you probably are thoroughly familiar already with components and groups, but I'll give a quick recap. For a start, we can take any combination of lines and surfaces and select them all, right-click on them, and a menu will pop up asking us if we want to make it a group. Let me draw a rectangle over here. Or right-click, and I have the option to make it a group or to make it a component. If it's something I think I'm only going to be using one time, I'll probably make it a group. If it's something that's going to be repetitive, I'll make it a component. Making it a component means I'm going to be giving it a name. Now I'm going to just get rid of that. And that's what I did with the balcony here. I made it into a component, which I called Balcony 1. And that was the process. I simply drew the rectangle, right-clicked, and chose Make Component. And then I went inside that component and I made the second component inside of it, which is 1/2 of the balcony. And as I develop that half of the component, as we saw, the other half will change accordingly. I just want to mention one other useful trick here, and that is that I can make a copy of that if there's some reason why I'm finding it difficult to edit my component while it's within the space I'm working on. This is something I do a lot with roofs. I can make yet another copy of the component, and I can simply edit my copy. And the other copies will change as well. Sometimes it's inconvenient to be working up against another object or something and having an extra copy out in space here, which I can edit easily, makes it easier to get the work done. And then once you've gotten all the things done to it that you need to do, you can just take that copy and delete it, and you're back ready to continue on. So that was just a couple of tips on using components and editing them. A quick comment here about building codes. This is a residential project, so I'm designing it according to the International Residential Code, IRC 2018. And as far as fall protection, I just wanted to say this. We're looking at a situation with a window. This is not a balcony rail serving a space people can actually occupy. If it were a balcony rail, it would be called a guard, and it would need to be a minimum 36 inches high. If you look in the code section R312.1, it tells you where it's required and the height. 36 shall not be less than 36 inches in height. But since this is actually a window opening rather than that, we only have to consider up to 24 inches. So I'm actually doing this design based on this R312.2 window fall protection. Now, the actual design of the guardrail, the size of it's going to be more than that because I want it to match pretty closely the original Lanterne design. But those are the code parameters we have to work with. And I should also mention that the original design doesn't meet current code, so we're going to have to make some changes to it. Okay, so I thought it would be a good idea just to cross my T's and dot my I's here. And so I brought up the code, the relevant code section from 2018 International Residential Code, IRC. It's R312.2, window fall protection, and it gives you the outline of what you need to know about window fall protection. If the sill is less than 24 inches, so a 24-inch sill, strictly speaking, is okay, but less than 24 inches, I'm going to do it. My window sill is about 12. Operable window opening will not allow a 4-inch diameter, then you're all right. So if it's a fixed window, you don't need fall protection, obviously. If it's a window like a double hung, and you put a device on the window that prevents the lower portion of the window from being opened more than 4 inches, your local code official has the right to overrule that, but strictly speaking, that would satisfy the code. However, if the window opens wide, like these casement windows do, then you're going to need fall protection. Hello, I am back. It's morning and I'm fortified with a cup of tea, and we're hard at work here, finishing up this balcony. I'll show you what we've got at this point. This is the balcony with the windows, so the balcony's on each side of the center. And I've got one last piece to do on the main part of the balcony, and then some little brackets that will not be seen, which will connect it to the wall. But I wanted to show you how I developed these elements here. The last piece I have to do is the top rail. There is already a rectangular section up there, which is mainly structural, but I want to have something that's got some curves in it so that it feels better to the touch. Looking in our favorite little catalog here, I see down in the bottom right, there's a handrail where I'm circling my mouse, and you'll see some key dimensions on it. D, that's the width at the underside. D is 1 inch and 9/16. So that means it's intended to fit a 1.5 inch wide. It's a cap for a 1.5 inch wide piece of rail. And then the overall dimensions A and B are also given here. So I don't like working to 32nds of an inch, and if I can avoid 16ths of an inch, I do. I like to usually keep to 1/8 of an inch when I do these models. It's just a little bit easier. So I'm going to approximate that section. And what I've done is I've simply drawn a little rectangle up here that is of those dimensions. I think I did 7/8, 7/8 by 2 1/4. And what I will be doing is drawing out that profile to fit over this 1.5" wide rail and then extruding it. So I'll pause this now and I'll draw the profile and then we'll extrude it. I've put in a bunch of guidelines. That's using the ruler tool. My keyboard shortcut is D. I can line it up with an edge and click on it and then pull in the direction I want, and it gives me a guideline. I find it very helpful to put in guidelines as I'm developing shapes. So let's now draw some arcs. And A for me is arc, my keyboard shortcut. On the bottom right corner of the screen it says sides. I'm going to use 6 because these are very small arcs. If I use too many sections to draw an arc, it just ends up looking cluttered. Sometimes it doesn't even allow me to. Let's see if I can get it to, there you go. So there's some arcs. Now let's see if I can make this work. I'll just eyeball this one. Doesn't need to be exact. Oops. Yeah, that's about it. That's about good enough. I see a problem here. I'm going to bring this down. Bring this down. The shape we are. Go back to the catalog and look at the shape again. This is the one we are working on. I need to adjust these. Move that out 1/8. Move that out 1/8. And then it's going to have to curve. Come back down to there. That's pretty ugly. That's not quite right. Arc. Quarter. Half. All right. Let's do this. Scale this all up a little bit. Now I can put my arc in here. And this is just too small to be, oh, that'll do. I could beat this thing to death, or I could just get the job done. That looks pretty good. Erase the stuff I don't need. I'm going to do one more thing here. This actually has an indentation under it. Goes up about 1/8 of an inch. No, maybe 1/4. Cross. Erase that bit and then lower the whole thing down as it fits over the top of that rail. So you see how it fits over the top of that rail. And then I'm going to use the Follow Me tool, one of my favorites. I'm going to draw the path that I want it to take. So these two lines are the path that it's going to follow. This is the face I'm going to extrude. I've got to reverse the face first. Select the path. F is Follow Me. And there we go. Ta-da! There's our cap rail. Last little thing to do here, clean up the end. Because it's a continuous piece, but the way I've modeled this in 2 halves, I end up with a line down the middle. So one of the little things I like to do is I have a tag. You see tags on the right side of the screen. I have a tag called Always Off. And it's a convenient place to store geometry that I may want to go in and edit at some point, but it's stuff that I would not be seeing in real life. So I'm going to put those edges on the tag Always Off. And I should add that there's another way to do it. You can use the erase tool with Shift and that will hide the element. Hiding it works as well, but if it's something I think I might want to get at in the future, I find that it's convenient to have it on a layer and just toggle the layer on and off when I need it. So I'll move those things to always off, and they disappear. And there is our cap rail. Now I'm going to also do what I just described. Here we see when I made this cap rail, it was the top edge was 3 curves. That means that this line and this line define the boundaries of those curves. And those are lines I'm never going to edit. I'm not going to be messing around with those. So I'm going to use the erase tool with Shift, and that will simply hide them. So we've seen 2 different ways to hide lines that we don't normally see. So the process that I used to make the profile of that handrail is basically the same process I used to do all of these scrolls. I drew a rectangle and then and grouped it so that it was easy to edit without messing other things up. And then within that rectangle, I would draw a single curve. And then I would use the offset tool to offset a parallel curve. Close the ends so that it creates a complete solid surface. Erase the bits of the rectangle that I didn't need, and then extrude what was left. So that was the process I used for building up all those shapes. And I think that's it for the balcony. I think that pretty much wraps it up for the balcony. There is only one thing left to do, and that is that there will be some brackets underneath here and underneath here, which go through the finished surface of the wall to the framing behind and attach to the framing behind. Those brackets will be put in place before the wall finishes go on. And then after the wall finishes are in place, the balcony can be set on those brackets and screwed in, and that will secure it. Now I made a fairly stout bottom rail, actually a very stout bottom rail and top rail. These are 1 inch by 1.5 inch. Let me check. Yeah, 1 inch by 1.5 inch solid rectangular steel shapes. And then I've got 4 of the verticals that are continuous as well. So I believe that that framework is strong enough to provide the necessary support for anybody who might fall against it from inside. And also I think that it will be adequate for not deflecting downward between those 4 bars connecting the top and bottom rails, plus these additional elements here. I think it's more than strong enough. The tubes are 1 inch square. Actually, these would be solid 1 inch square, and then these are 1/2 inch sections. Oh, I should mention one last thing. I am going to draw a circle that is 4 inches in diameter. Make a little group out of it. And I wanted to mention, as I developed the design of this, I had to make sure that, as per the code, I can't get a 4-inch ball through the rail anywhere, because the code requires that there be no gaps that would allow the passage of a 4-inch ball. So you see my 4-inch circle here would be blocked. I actually added these little curlicue things here because I had a gap here that was slightly too big. If you picture the balcony without that, if you picture it without this little curl, the space here would have allowed the passage of a 4-inch ball. So I added that piece to block the passage of that ball. So that's just one more little code thing that you have to consider as you're working on the design. It looks like I should have put one here and I slipped my mind. I'm going to copy these little curls over to here because there should be one here. You see the ball can go through right there. That's not allowed. So I'm going to take this curl and I'm going to copy it down here. I also had the same issue in the very center. So once I've made that little correction, the balcony's done. Hope you enjoyed this little video. The next video, we're going to look at the master bedroom suite, which I'm going to wrap up the design of. I've decided on some small changes, and then we'll see where we go from there. Have a great day. Bye-bye.